Welcome to Fugitive Currents on the Organic Filaments Network. Like, share, and subscribe to stay with us as we uncover the hidden infrastructures of state repression, racial governance, and resistance. Thank you for tuning in. This is your host, Sher Ali Khan. Eminent South Asianist scholars Arjun Appadurai and Sheldon Pollock recently wrote an op-ed calling for a new social contract between American universities and their boards of trustees. And who actually runs Columbia University? They argue that boards have been captured by hedge fund managers, tech billionaires, and bureaucrats. People too self-centered to be trusted. They call for a return to shared governance. More professors, more teachers, more researchers on the board. But while they defend the idea of the university, something else is happening, not behind the scenes, but in broad daylight. Students across the country, especially those who are Palestinian, Muslim, Arab, Black, and Brown, are being disciplined, surveilled, suspended, or expelled. Protesters are being investigated. Visas are being revoked. Faculty have lost jobs. Entire student organizations have been banned. Grief itself has become suspect. Students who mourn Palestinian lives are accused of promoting hate. Their sorrows treated as violence. Their pain is seen not as human, but as political threat. This isn't just repression. This is a refusal to acknowledge certain people as people at all. There is a long history behind this. In the university, not everyone is recognized as fully human. Not everyone's grief is seen as real. Some students are allowed to mourn, to be angry, to protest. Others are told their emotions are inappropriate, excessive, unsafe. That's not about tone, that's about structure. The institution decides which lives matter enough to grieve and which must be kept outside of the frame. This is how power protects itself, by determining who is allowed to feel and who must be punished for feeling it all. Some students are welcome, celebrated, included, until they speak in ways the university cannot contain, until they name the violence it enables, until their grief becomes impossible to ignore. And then the shift happens. Suddenly, they are no longer students, they are problems. Disruptions, security risks, their pain becomes unreadable, their presence becomes intolerable. This is how institutions maintain order, not just through punishment, but by defining what counts as personhood in the first place. Who is allowed to be seen? Who is allowed to be heard? Who can be mourned? And who can be disappeared without consequence? The same racial logics that undergird the US settler colonial state shape the university. These are not separate spaces. The university is an engine of legitimacy. And as Christina Sharp has referred to, it operates within the afterlife of slavery and the structure of conquests. It does not merely exclude, it decides the very terms of recognition. You are not expelled for breaking the rules. You are expelled to preserve them. Dehumanization here is not always loud. It happens through policy, precedent, and silence, through constant reminders that some students exist at the edge of acceptability. Never fully inside, always conditionally present. And when they speak or mourn or protest, that thin line is made clear. They are no longer people with pain. They are liabilities, risks, problems to be removed. And they are removed not despite the university's values, but to protect them. Some students are not merely pushed outside of the frame. They are made to define the boundary of the frame itself. Their presence is tolerated only insofar as it reminds everyone else where the line is drawn. They are rendered hyper-visible as threats and invisible as humans. The university does not need to openly endorse violence. It only needs to decide whose lives are legible and whose are not. It works not only with policy and policing, but with the quiet machinery of erasure. Denied appeals, revoked access, emails unanswered, stories untold. And while this is happening, the response from the powerful scholars is more teachers on the board, better procedures, a rebalanced governance model. But the students being targeted are not asking for procedural fairness. They're trying to survive. This isn't a governance issue. It's a system built to mark certain students as threats. The moment they act like they belong, the moment they refuse silence, the moment they grieve out loud. The university is not neutral. It aligns itself with power. It speaks the language of safety while working with donors, police, immigration, enforcement, and political pressure to disappear those who challenge it. It doesn't just react to protests. It manages reality. It defines what kind of speech is legitimate, what kind of mourning is acceptable, what kind of body can be present without being treated as excess. Across campuses, students have been branded as extremists, their words criminalized since the genocide began. The scale of repression has been staggering. Groups like Students for Justice in Palestine banned, peaceful demonstrators arrested, visa-holding students detained and processed for deportation. At least 300 student visas have reportedly been revoked under Marco Rubio's orders. And all of this while boards of trustees, university presidents, and federal officials invoke the language of safety and civility. To be clear, this isn't about safety. It's about control. It's about punishing those who make visible the racial calculus that deems Palestinian life ungrievable, Muslim protests dangerous, and Black and brown bodies expendable. But this is not simply about culture war. This is not prejudice in the interpersonal sense. It is a system where institutions, universities, courts, immigration agencies operate in sync, reinforcing each other to define who counts as human, who is a threat, and who can be made to disappear. It's the fusion of governance, enforcement, and ideology, what some call the total state, where no part of public life stands outside of the reach of a racialized control. This is why the language of inclusion fails. The university does not simply reflect the state, it helps naturalize its logic. Structured by biracial governance, it offers entry to some while marking others as threats. It welcomes international scholars only to deport them when they speak out. It promises safety but punishes speech, and in doing so, it reproduces the very order it claims to oppose. The rhetoric driving these actions is familiar. As I wrote last year, terms like radical, terrorists, and Islamists have once again become tools of statecraft. This is the post-9/11 playbook recycled and intensified. Marco Rubio recently boasted of canceling 300 visas of students who participated in pro-Palestinian protests. His justification: we don't want lunatics in our country. Ferreira de Silva reminds us that racialized logic is not just a way of thinking. It is a system of meaning imposed through power. It governs who is marked as ethical and who is positioned as affectable, acted upon, surveilled, removed. The ethical subject, the imagined rational human of modernity, is structurally white and European. Black, brown, and Muslim lives are not merely excluded from that category. They are produced as outside of it. They are denied not only power, but even the possibility of being seen as moral or human. This is why Rumesa's abduction by ICE at Tufts was not a mistake, but part of the order. And it's not just her. Across institutions, the line between dissent and danger has been collapsed. From canceled lectures to visa revocations, the message is consistent. If you speak too clearly, if you grieve too publicly, you become expendable. It's why Dr. Joanne Louis' lecture on Gaza and humanitarian aid was canceled by NYU for being anti-governmental. It's why Mahmoud Khalil, a Palestinian student at Columbia, was detained and placed in ICE custody. Why Ranjani Srivasan's student visa was revoked. Why Badr Khan Suri, a Georgetown graduate student, was detained after attending a campus vigil. Why Muhammad al-Mahdi, a Sudanese undergraduate, was expelled after a peaceful walkout. The list continues to grow. In a recent statement published in the Somerville Times, writer Azra Rahim described Rumeysa Öztürk as a brilliant scholar and a kind, gentle human being. She brewed Turkish tea for her colleagues. She taught children's literature. She made her abduction is not a story of exception. It is a warning. It shows us what this moment is. A time when scholarship is criminalized, when being Muslim, brown, or outspoken is enough to be disappeared. And this is why the call from Appadurai and Pollock, well-meaning as it may be, feels untimely, even dissonant. While they propose procedural adjustments and more balanced trustee boards, students are being arrested, deported, and silenced. The crisis is not that there are too few professors on university boards. The crisis is that the university itself has become an extension of state repression. Students are not demanding representation on committees. They are demanding the right to exist, to grieve, to speak. And in this moment, procedural reform feels less like a solution and more like a delay. What we need is not rebalancing. What we need is rupture. So again, we ask, who runs Columbia? Who runs Tufts? Not just trustees, not just billionaires, but a system that decides whose grief is legitimate, whose speech is tolerable, and whose life can be made to vanish. It does not need reform. It needs to be exposed, and it needs to be confronted. This has been the Fugitive Currents on the Organic Filaments Network. Like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay grounded, and refuse the silence they demand.